Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Ketubot daf Mem Daled, and we are at the top of Mem Daled Amud Aleph. We're specifically going to pick up on the third line, the third word from the end of the line, Amar Mar. And that Amar Mar means that we're effectively quoting. It won't be, although usually it's a precise quote. It's not going to be a precise quote at this moment. But where the idea is that we had yesterday a machloket between Rav Huna and Rav Asi. Rav Huna said that when it comes to a ketubah, that and the woman is trying to collect it. So when she goes to collect, the date of Erisin, which is the date that the rabbis instituted, the date that that's the first step of marriage, and that is the date that the rabbis say that effectively you are going to be required to commit to a ketubah. That's the day that the ketubah obligation, the obligation to have a ketubah begins, and then at the nisuin, at the actual wedding, at the ceremony, at the chuppah, that is when the ketubah actually gets written, and often the man will add to the size of the ketubah. In fact, we double it in our day, and that's the general practice in the Ashkenazic community. I believe in the Sephardic community, they still have flexibility to write in any amount that they see fit. So, so Rav Huna says that the base amount is collectible from the time of the Erisin, and the additional amount is collectible from the time of the Nisuin. And why does that matter? Because if the man had property between those two dates, and he then sold that property, the sale of that property would be subject to a mortgage for the payment of the first 100 or 200, meaning the base amount of the ketubah would be collectible against that property that he sold between those two dates.
The property doesn't belong to him anymore.
That's correct. And that's the amazing thing. If I have a contract, if I lend you money, and this is a very important principle, so it's worthy of spending a few moments in the introduction to talk about it. If I lend you money, if it's an oral agreement, well, then I don't have any claims to any of your property because it's not a written down agreement. And as a result, it's not, we can't assume that everybody knows about it. Okay, we're talking about the claims that people have on other people's real estate, on other people's physical property. And so if I lend money to Stan and I don't have a written contract, then I have no rights to try and take away his land. Okay, but if I do write a contract, if I write a contract that I say that I lent Stan, $200, and Stan signs it, so, and we have witnesses, you and James are the witnesses, Mark, and we have a valid contract, the assumption is that everybody in town knows about it. And so as a result of the fact that everybody knows about this, we're going to understand that anytime that Stan now sells any property that he has, let's say he sells the property to Lori, so I could go and take that property away from Lori. If that property is worth $200 and Stan doesn't have the money to pay me, I can go to that property directly and collect from that, because it's as if there was a mortgage on it. And the same thing is true with respect to the ketubah. The ketubah is just like the husband was effectively lending the money the wife was lending the money to the husband, and she has the right to collect from property. And so the question that we're talking about right now, the machlokas that we're talking about right now, is between Rav Huna and Rav Asi as to when is the relevant date for that ability to collect from property.
I'm going to talk about Rashi today.
I'm sure we'll talk about Rashi today. Absolutely. One of the first things we're going to do is talk about Rashi. So we'll get there in a moment. But so that's the question. So Rav Huna says that the base amount of the ketubah, whether it's 100 for a previously married woman or 200 for a non-previously married woman, that is going to be collectible based on the date of erusin, on the date of that first step in marriage. Whereas everything extra will focus on the date of the nisuin when the final step of marriage takes place and when the contract actually becomes written, because the base amount becomes obligated on some level, according to Rav Huna, from the time of erusin, but the contract is going to be written based on the time of the nisuin. Rav Asi disagrees, and in fact, this is how we paskin, and says everything, all the collection is based on the time of the nisuin. That's exactly right.
David, quick question. This nisuin, erusin and nisuin, it's completely minhag, right? I mean, there's no reason why marriage is 2 steps. I mean, it's not in the Torah.
No. The 2 steps are obligated in the Torah. It's not explicit, but it certainly comes from the Torah, and you do need 2 steps for marriage to be complete. So there is. A husband is not allowed to engage in marital relations with his wife if he has only done kedushin and not nisuin.
How do we know that?
I'm sorry that I don't have it.
That's okay. That's all right. But I mean, I thought it was just practice.
No. The practice was the fact that it was often separated by several months, even potentially a year. But what we do today is definitely we do both steps, and we do all the steps according to every kind of opinion as to what those steps were. So I'm pretty sure that the source of the 2 different steps is biblical. But I honestly, God willing, we'll get to kedushin and we'll get it more explicit. I presume, as we go through Masechet Kedushin.
Okay.
Do you have a follow-up question, Kanan?
No, I just, just a sort of a fundamental question is like, where does that all,
I'll try and have that.
It's okay. It's all right.
For next week. So most likely, Ellie probably knows it off the top of his head. So if you see him tomorrow, you can ask him.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dan.
I'm just going to ask. The concept of mortgaging or collecting from the person who I sold whatever to, and wanting to make the ketubah for.
Yep, for the while.
It's a difficult concept, I'm sure, even then.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a fascinating concept. The idea of, really, this is the source for the idea of mortgage and of a lien, right? Exactly, of a lien on property, and indeed. Today, correct, it still exists. That's exactly right. And indeed, today, that's exactly right. Today, we have a system where you have to record your lien, and it's based on the date of the recording of your lien.
The lien comes back. This is today.
Right.
The lien comes back as there is, quote unquote, a problem. The sale or the deal could be
correct. That's exactly right. My wife deals with those kinds of situations on a regular basis. Usually it doesn't come back, but usually it comes back with a problem, but usually the problem is fixable because somebody forgot to record something. But yes, absolutely, that's why it's important to do those checking. All right, so that with that background of this machlokus, we then, just to remind us exactly where we are, we had attempted to find an inconsistency within Rav Huna's position. Again, Rav Huna is the one who said you collect the base amount from the erusin and the additional amount from the nisuin. And the problem is that he seemed to say in a separate case that if a man gave his wife 2 ketubot, one for 200, one for 300, he can collect from one of them, but not both of them. He can collect from either of them, but not both of them. And the main point that we want to highlight is he can't collect 200 from the first and 100 from the second, saying that the 300 is meant to be an addition. And we explained that no, the point is that he can collect from either one of them because of the way the choice was not to write them as an addition, meaning if he wanted them to be both collectible, he could have said, and in addition to the 200 that I'm doing, I'm also giving you this one. Or he could have said that this is a bump up of the 200. If he would have said any of that kind of language, well, then we would have understood it. And yesterday, Hanan made the excellent point. Well, what about ordinary contracts where you have two different dates? Well, that's going to be, of course, as is often the case, the Gemara is going to take that next tack. So we go with Amar Mar, third line on Mem Dalet Amud Aleph, third word from the end of the line. So Amar Mar, Ibaya Bahai Gavya, Ibahai Gavya, Ibai Bahai Gavya. That if he wants to, he can collect from the 200 contract or the 300 contract, or in connection with our, so he can collect from one of those, that he cannot collect from both. So Lema Pliga de Rav Nachman. Should we be saying that he disagrees with Rav Nachman? De Amar Rav Nachman, Shtei Shtaros Hayotzim Bezachar Zeh. If you have two contracts, one after the other. So one contract, I say that I'm going to sell you the field for $200, and then I have a contract that I'm going to give you the field. So which, what's the story? Or then I have a contract that I'm going to sell it to you for $100. What's the story with those situations? So Shnei Shtaros Hayotzim Bezachar Zeh, Bittul Sheni Es Harisa. The second one, according to Rav Nachman, undermines the first, and we assume. And now Rashi says, Shtei Shtaros, Shel Sadeh Achat, Shel Mecher O Matana. We have two contracts regarding a field. Either it's a sale of a field, and this is again in Rashi, Mark, the Katvan Ruvain L'Shimon, Echad B'Nisan, Ve'echad B'Sivan. And Ruvain writes it for Shimon, one in, I have this wrong on the screen, but Reuben writes it for Shimon for one is in the first day of Nisan and one is in the first day of Sivan. So like the first day of January and first day of February.
That's a different case, because that's the same. It's the same terms, just a different date. But your example is different terms.
Right. It should be the same. The same people should be involved. I misunderstood Rashi the first time I read it. Now I was seeing that it's definitely the same people that are involved, but the terms are going to change. So the terms between the two contracts are changing, and at the very least, the date is changing. So right. So the question is which of the contracts is the valid contract? And Rav Nachman says, right. No, only the second one is the valid contract. Now, the point is that what we saw here, right, when it came to Rav Huna was saying that no, the second contract is not the only valid contract. We're going to assume that both contracts are valid, and the wife will have the ability to collect either not both, but either the first one or the second one in the 200 and 300 case. So lavmi itmar Allah. No, so you have to understand, the Gemara is explaining that with respect to Rav Nachman's statement, Amar Rav Papa, Umoda Rav Nachman, Dei Osif Be Dikla. If he adds a palm tree to the sale, L'Tosefes Kastek. Now we understand it does not mean that the first one was a false contract, but rather it means that the first one is being added to. So Hakanami Ha'osef Lamedi. And so here in the 200, 300 case, because there was an additional 100 written, so as a result, we're going to say in both cases, both the contracts are good. And Rashi explains, L'Tosefes Kasvei, below Libetule Lakama, and it was not written, the second contract was not written to undermine the first. Ella De'im Zamen Sheni, Asi Lamagbe, Asi Lamagbe, Likne Ikar V'Tosefes. Right, so if he wants to, he can take the second contract and he can take the main part of the contract, meaning the land, and he can take the added part of the contract of the dekel. But on the other hand, if he's worried about his own ability to collect from my assets between the two dates, so that I might have disposed of between the two dates, well then, he could take from the first contract, Mishum Dekadim, because it's earlier, low Likne Tosefes. And if he does that, then he does not get the added dekel tree. He will not get the added palm tree. So
in that case, it's like a codicil. I mean, all the terms are the same. It's just an addition to the contract.
Correct. Well, that's exactly what.
There's no inconsistent terms.
That's correct, and that's what we're saying in connection with the 200 and the 300 of the tuba, right? So the 200 and the 300 are not inconsistent. It's just as if you added the decultry. And in both cases, Rashi is saying that in both cases, the buyer or the woman can collect from either one. Although the second one has more stuff in it, it is subject to a later date. And so as a result, it is more risky. On the earlier contract has the earlier date. That means that she has that the buyer has more access to protections, and the woman has more access to things that would have been sold between those two times. So that is why. And so, again, we talked in the introduction, Hanan, we talked about how a written loan document effectively constitutes a mortgage against all property that is sold from the date of the written loan document until the loan document is paid off. And so as a result, the same thing on some level is true with respect to every sale of real estate. Meaning, if I buy real estate from you today, and then somebody comes and collects it, I can go and try and collect back from you, because all contracts for real estate are effectively debt contracts. So again, let's say I buy a piece of real estate from Stan for $200, and then James, who lent Stan money, comes and takes the land away from me. My contract for $200 is as if it becomes a loan against you, and I can now go, and if Stan also sent sell the $200 property to Mark, and that property was after, and he sold it after he sold me the property, I have the ability to go to Mark to do that collection. So that's the story. So the point is that the dates really do matter. So we've explained how, in fact, Rav Nachman does not have to be inconsistent with Rav Huna. So now we're going to analyze Rav Nachman's statement. So Kufa, Amar Rav Nachman, Shtei Shtaros Hayotzim B'Zachar Zeh, Bittul Sheni Es Harishon. We say the second one nullifies the first. So Amar Rav Papa, Umoda Rav Nachman Di Yosef Dikla, L'Tosefes L'Chaspei. And again, we have the same statement. We're just analyzing. We looked at the same statement. We're going to look it over again. So we said that in the second contract, if it adds something, then we're fine, and both contracts are valid. Well, Pshita, isn't this obvious? Rishon b'mecher, v'sheni b'matana. If you have the first one, now the point is that if you do some addition. So the point is that if you have the first one as a sale document and the second as a present, liyapot koko hu dekasav like. The point is the reason that I wrote the first contract as a sale contract is I was going to sell it to you. Now I'm going to give it to you. Well, but you presumably have already paid me for the first contract. So why would I also write a contract that effectively gives it to you? Mishum dina devar metzra, because of the rule associated with the neighbors. What's the rule associated with the neighbors? Is that if I live next to James, and I sell my piece of property to Stan, then James has the right to say, I'll pay you that exact same amount for that piece of property, because there's no ability otherwise for me to get access to that property. I effectively, as your neighbor, have a right of first refusal. And so as a result, that's the concept of bar mitzvah. And Tosos says, is very interestingly here, says that it must be that in order for Stan to prevent James from utilizing his bar mitzvah rights, it must be that he would only show the gift contract and not the underlying original contract. It could also be like, as I think Stan and I were thinking about it as we were reading this. Obviously, the other way to read this is that, in fact, the sale contract had not been closed on, or had not been the value had not been transferred, and so really it did change from a sale to a gift. But in any event, that's the situation. That's situation number one. But kol shekain, and so as a result, in that situation, certainly both contracts will remain valid. And certainly if I first say I'm going to give the gift to you, and then I say that I'm going to sell it to you. Why is that important? Because the Amrina Mishum Dina de Baal Chovhu de Kasav came, right? It's because I wanted to make sure in both cases, if I give you property or I sell you property, if I lent money to James, if I borrowed money from James first, and James is now going to collect from that property, he can collect from that property because I borrow the money from James first, so he has the preceding lien on the property. But the question is what happens to you? If I gave it to you as a gift, well, then it's tough luck, right? I mean, he gets it. James is gonna get the property no matter what. Okay, the property's worth 200. I borrowed 200 exactly. He has a lien on the property. He's gonna get it. But the question is what happens to you, Stan? So if I wrote it as a gift, so then tough luck. I wrote it as a gift. You don't get anything. But if I now change that gift and I change it from a gift to a sale, then even if you don't actually pay me any money, if I give you that contract so that you're now holding that contract, you now have the right to claim against others of my assets the $200 that I wrote into the contract, that was the purchase price. So that's why I might want to write a sale contract after a gift contract. But if they're both sale contracts or they're both gift contracts, well, then the second one will undermine the first. So that is the ruling associated. So my time, what is the reason that the second one is going to nullify the first? So Rafram Amar, Emer Oduye Odile. It's because the recipient, the person who's holding the earlier contract, is basically admitting that the first contract was not a valid contract, and so as a result, that's why he wants the second contract, even if it has a later time. So Rav Acha says no, that Amar Achule Achle Lishibude. No, the guy's being nice to the person and saying, I'm not going to be able to claim from your later sales. So let's give this let's try and give an example so that it's very clear. So on January 1st, I sell a piece of property worth 200 to Stan. On February 1st, I sell a piece of property worth 200 to James. And now but I like James better. And you know that James is like family to me. And so you understand, and you know that, and I say to you, listen, I would prefer that you not be able to take the property away from James. So listen, that was the only piece of property I've sold between January 1st and when my sale to you and now March 1st. So do me the favor, let me rewrite you the contract for March 1st. And now I'll know that the property that I sold to James will never be you won't be able to take that away. If now other creditors come and take away your property, they won't be able to take away, you won't be able to take it away.
What's the advantage for me with that whole thing?
Because maybe I have other property that I want you to sell, you want me to sell you. You want to do me a favor, lots of other possibilities. There's going to be an outside reason to our relationship that you would want to do that. So that is the opinion of Rav Acha. So now we're going to deal with the differences between these two approaches. So my Beinaihu, what is the difference between these two approaches? So Ika Beinaihu, Orue Sade, what happens if with respect to the witnesses on the first contract? Now, if in fact, when you take the second contract, you're effectively admitting that the first contract was a forgery, well, then you're basically saying that the first witnesses on that contract are false witnesses. So Rashi puts it as you treat them as effectively false witnesses. But Toso says no, it's the admission of the holder of the contract is not enough to make any witnesses considered invalid witnesses. That's just one, he's just admitting. So he says that actually the point is only contracts that are held by Stan. Stan is now saying that witness A and witness B on that original contract, those two guys, if I have another contract with those same two witnesses, it's probably also a false contract. Alternatively, it would just be witness A and witness B in cases involving Stan that they would not be able to testify. Tosfos explained. So, all right, so that's the first potential difference. What? Because according to Rafram was saying that the reason that the first contract is going to be nullified is because effectively Stan is admitting that when I give him the second contract, he's admitting that the first contract was a false contract, that he's admitting that the first, so that's the Amar Oduye Odile. He's the recipient of the second contract is saying that he admits that the first contract was not really a good contract. That's what he's admitting to. Okay, so now, so that was difference number one. Pay rate. Now, what about if between the date of the first contract and the second contract, Stan eats fruit from my field? Okay, so if in fact he's admitting that the first contract was not valid, then he owes me money for the fruit that he ate between the first date and the second date. But if in fact, according to Rav Acha, it's just Stan being nice, well, then he doesn't owe me anything. So that's difference number two. And the finally one is ulataska, for taxes, for property taxes. So obviously the property tax that Stan would owe, according to the first explanation, is only from the second date, because the first date wasn't even a real contract. It was a faulty contract. But if it was according to the second approach, where Stan is just being nice to me, well, then he would owe the taxes from the first one. So those are three different differences. And the Rishonim give other differences, but we're going to go on to the next piece. So now we got to decide, is the halacha like Rav Huna, or is the halacha like Rav Asi? So that's what we're going to turn to now. So now the Gemara is going to resolve it. So my habi Allah d'ksuva. What's the answer with the ksuva? So Tashma, the Amr of Yehuda, Amr Shmuel, Meshum Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. So it was said in the name of Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, Mana Masayim min har Erison, v'Tosefes min Nesuin. So they held like Rav Huna. The Chachamim Omrim, but the Chachamim say no. The Chachamim, the majority, say that no, we're going to follow the time of the Nesuin. So as a result, we follow the time of the Nesuin. So that in fact is how we paskin. And so that with that, we're now ready to go to the next Mishnah. Okay, so now in the next Mishnah, some important background. The important background is the fact that in the Torah, in Sefer Dvarim, Parak Kaf Bet, Pasuk Gimel to Kaf Aleph, it talks about a man marries a Nara and accuses her of having been with another man between Erisin and Nesuin. And then he even brings witnesses who testify to that effect. So now there are two different outcomes that are possible. One is if the witnesses get proven to be false, so the husband gets lashes, pays a fine, and he cannot divorce her against her will. Now, by the way, I think that in this case, the witnesses can be proven to be false. It doesn't just mean Zomamin. It doesn't mean that somebody comes and says that they were with us. But even if the underlying facts get proven false, so meaning that they prove that in fact she did have her signs of Basulim at the time of the marriage, so then the husband is going to have these three penalties: lashes, paying a fine, and he cannot divorce her against her will. And the second, if on the other hand, the witnesses are truthful, well, then the girl's going to be stoned in front of her father's house. So note, oops, I don't know what I have to fix that also. I've got a typo there. Okay, so our Mishnah deals with situations where the girl is a convert, the father doesn't have a house, or the girl does not have a father. So those are, or the father's no longer alive. So those are the three situations that we're going to deal with. And so let's take a look at those situations, and we're going to have two different situations of conversion. So first is Hagiyorishinis Gaira Bita Ima, that if you have a woman and she converts with her daughter, and the daughter has got to be under the age of 3, because if it's over the age of 3, we assume that she has had marital relations, and so as a result, that's why people understand that so we talk about the mother, but we're really going to be focused about the daughter in this case. So now Vizinsa, now the daughter gets married, and has adultery, so then harezo v'chenek. Oh, I forgot to say what the penalty is, right? So the penalty is that she's stoned in front of her father's house. I think I may have mentioned that, right? But the point is that the penalty is the death penalty is stoning. But since this woman was not Jewish when she was born, so as a result, she is going to be subject to strangulation. Strangulation is this is where what I was planning to write, but I failed to write it on the screen. The note that other cases of adultery, the punishment is strangulation, not stoning. And so as a result, this woman, even though she fits most of the category, because she was not born Jewish, so as a result, she is not subject to the case in Dvarim. We will see that it's because it says B'Yisrael, and so as a result, she is punished with chenek because she is still Jewish and did adultery, but she's not going to be punished with the penalty of being stoned in front of her father's house. So Ein lo Pesach Beis Ha'av, and she doesn't have any kind of the death that she has is not in front of her father's house. V'lo me'asela, and if in fact it turns out that the husband's claim is false, she is not entitled to the 100 sela. And Haisa Horasa. Okay, so now that's case number one. So now case number two, Haisa Horasa Shalo B'Kedusha V'Leda Sab B'Kedusha. What if the mom was pregnant when she became Jewish? She converted after she was pregnant. So the conception was before she was Jewish. The birth was after she was Jewish. Well, then Harezo B'Skila. Then the daughter gets skila. The Ein La Lo Pesach Beis Ha'av, but she doesn't get the death penalty in front of the father's house because she, from a Jewish perspective, she has a mother but no father, because the father, she was conceived only before the mother was Jewish. So as a result, that there is no aspect of a father being involved in that.
Which one is supposed to be worse, the skila or the chenek?
Skila is supposed to be worse.
Okay, so chenek is a
lesser kind of death penalty. Right. Not that I'm not sure which I prefer of the two.
I understand, but there is a point, right?
But they are also generally grouped together, so they are considered the more stringent of the two. But and indeed, there's an idea that people who are subject to them should not be buried with people who are subject to the other two death penalties. But all right, the Ein Lo Pesach Beis Ha'av. What happens if the father doesn't have a home that in front of which? And some people say, well, how could he not have a home? I mean, everybody lives somewhere. Of course, that isn't true. So people do live on the street. But the point is that, and this makes a lot of sense to me, that if he's renting the home, then the owner of the home can say, I don't want this to happen in front of my home. So the Ein Lo Pesach. So if there's no, I'm sorry, I apologize. So this is still the case of the situation where she was conceived prior to the mother's conversion and then born after the mother's conversion. So she gets skila, but she's not killed in front of her father's house. V'lo me'asela, and there's no fine that's associated with it, meaning that because again she has no father. So because the conception happened beforehand. Haisa horasa v'leda sab b'kedusha. If in fact she was born and she was conceived and born while her mother was Jewish, well then harehi kibas Yisrael l'chol devareha. So then she's totally Jewish. So everything applies. Now what happens? Now the Gemara comes with the next cases. So yesh la av ve'ein la pesach beis av. What happens if she has a father but the father doesn't have a home? So yesh la pesach beis av ve'ein la av, or the father had a home but the father has passed away now. Harezo b'skila. So she's subject to skila below namar pesach beis av ela lemitzvah. And the fact that the Torah says that you need to have a pesach beis av, that is only a mitzvah, meaning is not a prerequisite for it. So as a result, even if you don't have it, you can still be subject to the punishment. So now the Gemara explains. Mina hani milik. specifically, how do we know this rule that she is subject to stoning if she was conceived before her mom converted, but born after her mother converted? How do we know that that should get a case of skila and not be like the case of the woman who was converted when she was under the age of 3? How do we know that and a woman who was converted under the age of 3, but after birth, she gets strangulation, she gets chenek? How do we know that that shouldn't also apply to a woman who was conceived while the mother was not Jewish, and then born while the mother was Jewish? So the answer is Amar Reish Lakish to Amar Krava Mesa, right? Because the pasuk in Dvarim that talks about her being killed and says that the people in the city are going to stone her. So then it says, and she will die, okay? And she's going to die. Well, of course she's going to die. In every case of stoning, she's going to die, right? The pasuk in its complete form is V'hotziu es hanara el pesach beis abiha uskaluha v'anshei ira ba'avanim b'mesa. Right, so she gets stoned, including the stoning by the people in the city, and she dies. Ki asasan nivala b'Yisrael. Right, she did something disgusting in Israel. There's no to engage in immoral, illicit activity, beis abiyah, for her, in connection with her father's house. And you should destroy the wickedness that's in your midst. So So the reason of Mesa, the reason that she says she should die, so it comes to include that the fact that we have this extra word is coming to tell us that there's an extra case that's going to have this penalty, namely the woman who is conceived when her mother was not Jewish, but then born when her mother was Jewish. So ihachi milka nami nilka. Why not lash the guy if he turns out to be lying, and also make him pay the 100 sela fine? So Amakra v'mesa, because the additional word that we have is v'mesa, and she shall die. Lemisa nisrabasa below l'knas. The only addition is for her death, not in connection with anything else. We would have excluded it. We'll get to that in just a moment. So excellent question, but the Gemara is going to effectively ask that. The Emil Rabbos Harasa Veleda Subakadusha.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, the Gemara is going to talk about it. So the Gemara, excellent question. So the Emil Rabbos Harasa Veleda Subakadusha. Well, why don't we say that this is coming to tell us that it's talking about a woman whose conception and birth were while she was Jewish? Because maybe, and we'll see this in a moment, maybe when we say of the Yisrael, we mean that the mother of this girl needs to have been born Jewish herself. Okay, so no, Hahi Yisrael is Ma'al Yasahi. No, a woman who converts, she is considered a full-fledged Jew, and so this woman who is born from that mother is considered the daughter of a full-fledged Jew. So ve'emel rabos harasa v'leidasa shalom b'kedusha. Well, in that case, if a person who converts is considered a full-fledged Jew, well, why not have this death penalty of skila also apply to the woman who is converted when she's under the age of 3, whose conception and birth were all under the all happened while the mother was not Jewish? So the Gemara says, "Im kain v'Yisrael maya hanile." We had in this pasuk, right, that the idea was that the mesa ki asasa nevela v'Yisrael, right? She was doing something inappropriate in Israel. So as a result, that nivala by Israel, that she was doing something inappropriate in Israel. So what does it mean in Israel? That in Israel wasn't really needed in the pasuk either. So the point is, we have these two concepts that are now on some level coming in opposite direction. Israel is coming to limit the scope of this of the application of this mitzvah to only those who are considered in Israel. And then on the other hand, the Mesa is telling us something extra. And so it's coming to tell us that we're going to include somebody in addition. So in the end, what we do is we essentially split the baby, and we come up with the case of the woman who was conceived in when her mother was not Jewish and born when her mother was Jewish. Okay.
I made a compromise. Do we ever consider a baby who is conceived or the mother was Jewish to use anything else besides the Israel?
No, yes, there are. I don't have it off the top of my head, unfortunately. But yes, there is a difference between a woman who conceives while her mother who's conceived while her mother is Jewish, and a woman who is conceived while her mother is not Jewish, even if in both cases the birth happens when the mother is Jewish. And that is why, by the way, that after that there's this concept of waiting 3 months after a conversion, after divorce, but after conversion, to know whether or not the next child was conceived before or after. So that's it is an important factor. I can't give you off the top of my head, unfortunately, all the differences, but there are other differences. In fact, I wonder whether that, at least according to some opinions, I think that there might be a difference about whether or not she can marry a Kohen. So all right, but in any event, certainly I think that there's an opinion that says that. I don't know whether we actually paskin that way, but I think that there's an opinion that says that. Okay, so Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. So Hamotzi Shemra al Hayasoma Pater. So now we're going to deal with two final cases, and then we'll be done for today. So the first of the two cases is what happens if the girl involved has already lost her father. Do these rules apply? So if in fact the guy, especially if the guy is lying, if it turns out that the guy is lying, so Hamotzi Shemra al Hayasoma Pater. So Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina says, if you told this falsehood about somebody who's the girl whose father has already passed away, you are exempt. You're not going to have the lashes. You're not going to have the fine. Because what does the Torah say? It says that the money is given to the father of the girl. So prat lazo she'ein la'av. So this comes to exclude, according to Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, the girl who doesn't have a father any longer. So Meisiv Rabbi Yossi bar Avin v'itema Rabbi Yossi bar Zvida. So one of the Rabbi Yossis came and asked the question. Well, one second, we have a brisa that says that if her father shall refuse, this is a pasuk in connection with the seduction. This is in Shmos Parakaf Bet pasuk Tes Zayin. So it says that there, if the father shall refuse, and it uses that double language of ma'ain yima'ain. So what does the brisa come to teach us? L'rabos yisoma l'knas, that even a yisoma, even an orphan will get a knas. Divrei Rabbi Yossi Aglili. That's what Rabbi Yossi Aglili says. And so the point is that what we have here is a situation, and Rashi goes through this in greater detail. We'll do it just outside. But the point is that the cases of seducer and violation are learned from one another. And by violation, it says that giving to the father of the Nara. So the same kind of language that we have in this case of the Motzi Shemra, we also have by the violation case. And yet, in connection with the seduction and violation cases, we say that it does apply even if the girl is an orphan. And so as a result, it seems like either you're going to learn the same wording or you're not going to learn the same wording. And so since we've got the same wording and we're not learning it from it in connection with the seducer and the violator, we shouldn't also learn it in connection with the case of defamation. So as a result, one second, who mosiv la, who mefarik la. So, but Rabbi Yossi bar Avin or Rabbi Yossi bar Zvida, whoever it was, he also came up with the answer because beva alav achar kach nisyatma. No, that may be the case that we say when we have this brisa that says that it comes to include the Yisoma is talking about where the action happened, where the violation or the seduction happened, when the girl still had her father, but then the father died, and so now the girl has the right to deny and say, no, I don't want to marry you. And so as a result, that is where we would say that the penalty. So as a result, yes, we could have that situation, but now the Gemara is going to still now create an alternative view to Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. So we have Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina's position is that an orphan girl is exempt, but Rava disagrees, and he says Rava Amar Chayev. No, in fact, the person who defames even an orphan girl is obligated to pay the fine. Mimai, how do I know this? Midatani Ami, because we have a baraisa taught by Ami. So Besulas Yisrael, when it comes to a virgin of Israel. So that is the language that it says in connection with this case of defamation. V'lo besulas gerim. What does he say? He says that it tells us that it's got to be a virgin who is Jewish, not a virgin who is a convert. So, now, if in fact you say that an orphan girl who's Jewish, there is an obligation to pay, then that's fine. It makes sense that we have to teach this law because that's why you need to specifically come to exclude converts. But but if you say that a yisoma is not, that there is no obligation to pay the fine in connection with an orphan, well then you don't need to tell me about a convert. Every convert is considered an orphan. And so as a result, if a Jewish orphan is not going to get paid the fine, well, then certainly a convert orphan is not going to get paid the fine, because a convert's not going to get the pay the fine, because every convert is considered an orphan, because they're not considered to have their relationship to all their non-Jewish relatives effectively goes away. And even if those relatives convert, we say that effectively the relationship is not the same. We don't allow them to engage in immoral behavior, but still it's not considered to have that same kind of relationship. So as a result, we've ended up with two different opinions on this. Okay, and so now we have now we turn to the question of a and I believe that the halacha is like Rava. Rava is the way we conclude, and indeed the halacha is it seems to be like Rava. So Amar Reish Lakish. Now Reish Lakish deals with the final case of today, and that is, what about the defamation of a minor? Hamotzi shem ra al hakatana patur. So Reish Lakish explains that, and we saw this language previously. We saw, in fact, this whole piece we saw previously on Daf Mem Bet earlier this week. So Hamotzi shem ra al hakatana patur. If you engage in this situation where the husband the next day says that his wife did not have basulim, and he brings witnesses, and it turns out all to be false, he is not obligated if the child is a minor, because the fact that it says that it gives the money to the na'ara. Na'ara male diber hakasib, right? The word na'ara in that situation is written malay, is written with the final hey, and so as a result, that shows that it's a full-fledged na'ara. It doesn't include a katana. Well, maskif lo Rav Acha bar Abba. Rav Acha bar Abba asked, 1 second, timer diksiv bein hanara. Is it really because the na'ara is written with the extra hey at the end? Ha lav haki. Even if it hadn't been written with the extra hey, hava mina afilu katana. I would have thought that even I would never think that even a minor would apply, because haksiv v'im emes hayah dabar hazeh lo nimtzu b'sulim l'na'ara v'otziu es hanara el pesach beis avia uskalua. Right? It specifically says that she's going to get skila. And if in fact we're talking about a katana doesn't get skila. A minor child that can't get punished from the court of law. So katana lav bason shenhi. So as a result, ella kanara. So it must be, the point is that here it says the word na'ara written out full. So ha kol makom shenamar na'ara, any place where it says na'ara without the hey, afilu katana mashma. So the point is that not that because it has a na'ara hey with a hey here, it means a full-fledged na'ara, but rather we're going to learn from the fact that here it has a full hey. We're going to learn everywhere else, wherever it doesn't have a full hey, it isn't written with a hey at the end, so then it implies even a minor. And so we will pick up with here tomorrow, and we're going to be discussing the 3 different death penalties that could apply to a na'ara. Again, there's stoning outside her father's house, stoning at the entrance to the city, and strangulation. So stay tuned tomorrow as we will pick that up, God willing, then. That will be an hour before Min Kamarev. I don't know exactly when Min Kamarev is, but whenever it will be, that will be, no.
You won't be here next week.
I will not be here Monday and Tuesday. That is correct. But Dove will be here, hopefully. And so hopefully we'll be still meeting right here, God willing, on Monday and Tuesday.
The time.